And I'll try to generate, well, I mean, first, remember the reason that you showed up today. And based on that reason, generate an intention to use that time well. Yes, we're starting off just right. I am serene. I am like placid. This is sometimes what I have to do, and you realize you're getting neurotic. It's all right. It's off. Ta-da. Such coordination. Okay. Is everybody able to think of a reason why they show up and set an intention? You kind of get that? If you don't get it, it's okay. I found this very difficult when I started. So I'm just checking. I'm slow, but trainable. So now we want to just link our wishes for ourselves to be expansive into a wish that not only does it benefit ourselves, but that it also ripples out to benefit others. So in Buddhism, it said that the Buddha taught that whatever positive action we do, body, speech, or mind, creates the cause for a future, it plants a seed on our mind stream, like an imprint, that will ripen in the future in some sort of pleasantness, that our positive actions will cause positive results. And our negative actions also cause our negative results. But anyway, so anything that's positive, we want to rejoice that, we do positive things. And, showing up to work on your mind is a very positive thing. It's what we mostly can do to benefit the world, is work on our own minds so that we don't harm, So we like to go ahead from the beginning of everything that we do to think, oh, may it not just benefit myself, but may this also ripen to benefit others. And so that's what we mean. Ripen just means that a seed is sort of like growing now in some positive way. And we just don't want to be greedy about it. Now, in actual fact, the positive things we do create positive results for ourselves. We actually can't share it around. Otherwise, the Buddha would just have given us all his merit and we'd all be fine. So it doesn't actually, we don't have to worry about giving it away because we can't lose it. It will only be an experience for ourselves in the future. So, but we want to practice the mind that always wants to share the good stuff with others. That knowledge that everybody benefits when we're undisturbed. It's like the easy way I always remind myself is that little thing that if I'm not going to harm anybody, everyone around me is safe. That has real meaning in this world. That it's if you think that way and you don't do any harm, you really are protecting the people around you. I'm like, that most people, not most people, that's such an exaggeration, that many people, have the wrong idea about what they need, and it ends up in some sort of violence towards others, whether it's with speech or just thought or with actual physical harm. So whatever reason you showed up, rejoice, and we're going to recite the 4 measurables. to cement this idea of our wish for others also to be well. So it's on the screen, I think. May all sentient beings have happiness and the causes of happiness. May all sentient beings be free from suffering and the causes of suffering. May all sentient beings be inseparable from the happiness that is free from suffering. And may all sentient beings abide in equanimity, free from attachment for friends and hatred for enemies. So those are just the minds of love, which is wishing happiness for others, the mind of compassion, which is wishing others to be free of suffering, the mind of joy that is joyful in the happiness of others and wishes them to never be separated from that. And then equanimity, that we feel this way about everybody, no matter whether they are nice to us or not nice to us, whether they help us or don't help us, whether we like them or don't like them, that it has nothing to do with that. It's because they're a sentient being with mind and that they suffer, and we wish them to be free of that. That makes sense. Okay, so those of you who are Buddhists, we're going to recite it's on page 9, what page is it on? 98 or 90, yeah, 98. The refuge prayer. I help. This is just to remind us, those of us who've taken refuge or see this as our path, is just it's just a reminder that we found something to rely upon, a way to practice and act and think and talk and do with that helps lead to more happiness and reduces our suffering. And that's these, what they call it in here, the Buddha, the Dharma, and Sangha. So the Buddha is the actual, historical Buddha that taught the teachings. The Dharma is the teachings themselves, the words of the Buddha. And the Supreme Assembly are the other beings that became liberated from cyclic existence or became Buddhas themselves. They're the Supreme Assembly. That's our ultimate Supreme Assembly. But and we can also just think of our community of practitioners. But the Supreme Assembly are those beings who have liberated themselves from this mess of the world. So I go for refuge until I'm enlightened to the Buddha, the Dharma, and the Supreme Assembly. By the merits I create, listening to the Dharma, may I become a Buddha in order to benefit all sentient beings. I go for refuge until I'm enlightened to the Buddha, the Dharma, and the Supreme Assembly. By the merits I create through listening to the Dharma, may I become a Buddha in order to benefit all sentient beings. I go for refuge until I'm enlightened to the Buddha, the Dharma, and the Supreme Assembly. By the merits I create through listening to the Dharma, may I become a Buddha in order to benefit all sentient beings. That's it. Okay, so what did y'all notice in your minds this week? What habits of mind did you discover or face again? Yeah.
Patience, maybe words expressed, that impatience, and immediate regret. So a few instances of that. So I look at that positively, right? I didn't justify it. My mind, I knew that.
Of impatience. So you had some moments of impatience and you followed that up with immediate regret. That's great. Yeah. And what's lovely about recognizing when we do something that's not very skillful and then just immediately wishing we hadn't and kind of regretting it, maybe even apologizing for it if that's appropriate, is that you can let it go, finished. Because we're going to make mistakes. So, there's no reason to hold on to it, put it in our suitcase and carry it around for the rest of our lives, So it's more of just recognizing, I really don't want to say things like that or think that way, So, just as a reminder, that's what mindfulness is for, is to kind of remember, this is something I don't want to do. So then we can kind of use a corrective action like regretting it. Anything else? People, no news? Yeah. Resentment. Resentment's kind of a biggie. It's very powerful, isn't it? So what we want to do when we notice something like that is recognize it for the suffering state that it is. You know, it doesn't feel good to resent something, so that we can start to be determined to let that go. Because it's hard. Resentment by its nature means you've practiced it a while. That's how anger becomes resentment. It's something that hasn't been left alone. And so, you know, every time there's a trigger, like you see the person or there's some similar thing to it, you know, your mind goes there and you refresh that anger or frustration or whatever it is. And this builds up to resentment. And it's a sign. It's clearly a sign. I'm holding on to something. So you want to look at, you know, just notice, just observe. What am I holding on to? What is it? Is it that I feel disrespected? Is it that I feel dismissed? Is it that I feel like, you know, why would anybody treat me that way? You know, it's not fair, you know, all these things. And then you have to then kind of go, oh, like I've never treated someone unfairly. You know, I've never been dismissive of someone else's feelings. You know, you have to check up. Have I done that? Do you deserve forgiveness? Do you wish others are holding on to that mistake that you made? So that, you know, every time the thought of you comes up, they are angry. So it's just it's a matter of just kind of holding on to this. First of all, doesn't get even, does it? It has absolutely no impact on the other person. It can if we decide to act out. But in general, it's just us that are being tormented by this state of mind. And so it is to our own benefit to let it go. And we have to convince ourselves of that. And so we have to work on first of just, okay, I'm not going to spend another moment rehearsing this anger. You know, so what can I do instead? You know, and that's about exploring it, seeing is it your sense of self-worth that's been harmed, you know, and then you have to look at, but has it been harmed? You know, if it's been harmed, who's done the harming? What diminishes our self-worth?
Nothing.
Who has the power to diminish our self-worth? Ourselves. We take the words of the external event, we internalize it, and we may act as if it's true. You know? So we want to argue with that. So that's underneath it. You know, so you have to find what's underneath these things and kind of explore. And sometimes, you know, and it's just kind of, and often what has to happen is that you just have to sit quietly with it and see what bubbles up. You know, don't do that while you're actively like this. You know, you want to settle down a little bit and then kind of let it enter your consciousness again, but do it with wisdom, not just rehearsing the what happened, what this and that, whatever. Does that make sense? So it's just, and sometimes this can be, well, it's almost always uncomfortable to sit with something like resentment or the impatience, you know, here and sometimes it's just hard to sit with, oh, I did that. I still have that habit, you know, am I ever going to get rid of this habit? You know, probably it'll be a long time. So, you know, we have to not worry about that. We have to just think about, but what can I do in this moment to suffer less? Yes.
What do you do with people that are in your life that are constantly trying to destroy your self-worth or?
Yeah, well, first of all, you don't listen. It's really important to recognize when you're listening and you're taking it on. So you have to ask yourself, do you want to spend any time with this person at all? Why spend time with this person? Or can I just ignore this garbage? Because there might be, if it's a family member, there may be some other reasons why you want them in your life. Not this reason, but so you have to get good at separating yourself from those kind of conversations without, being nasty about it, but it's just, but you don't have to listen. In fact, you can kind of watch your mind start to listen. You go, I'm not taking that on. You just have this conversation ongoing in your mind to discount the garbage that's being thrown at you. Because we do say have garbage towards each other, don't we? I was thinking yesterday about how, if we have someone like that, and my father was very critical. And so, and it was just, it's just, I can't believe some of the things that he would say. And I can't believe what I listened to, that it was sort of, I took that on. And then I realized, sometimes, you think, oh, my father's just that way. Instead of recognizing it was also his habit, it also came from his experiences and his way of coping, or not coping, or however you want to look at it. And then I thought about how judgmental I can be, how I can meet someone new or just see someone, and I can just immediately, like I can see the family member and go, oh, why are they so negative? Blah, 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 blah. And I think if I said these words out loud, they'd be hurtful. I'd be doing to them what I'm hearing them do to others. And I know it's not helpful, So it's one of those ways to check up and say, okay, this is a reminder that when I'm in that kind of frame of mind, I want to counter it. Even if I haven't said any words, I don't want to have the habit of thinking like that. It's not helpful. And then it's much easier to generate compassion for the people who have these habits, because we know it's not fun when we're having one of those negative conversations in our head, or if we're criticizing someone else and then after the fact we kind of feel bad about it. We know that it's really not a very good feeling. So we want to have compassion for this other person. And even if we can't relate at all to their style, we can at the very least recognize, wow, that must be a hard mind to live with. Glad I'm free of that mind. And not take that next unhelpful step. They should change that mind. Because of course they would if they knew how, just like us. So it's really helpful when we're faced with those circumstances to think of some situation that we're terrible at, that we can't seem to get a grip on. I could be terribly impatient, and it's ridiculous. I feel so childish when it happens, but so that's my reminder. If I'm around somebody and you think, wow, do they hear themselves? They'd just be happier if they kept their mouth shut, blah, blah, blah. So, and then we can relate. That's the big key here. We live in a community, right? And harmony is needed for us to feel safe and, okay, and have moments of, interaction that are pleasant. So we want to participate as much as we can in working on our minds in such a way that we can be more harmonious. That creates the cause. We're having harmonious friends, and it just feels better. Even if it doesn't bring you any more friends, it just is a better way to think in the sense of reducing your own suffering. Yes.
What about if you're using this self-talk with somebody who's very negative, forced to be in their, you're forced to be around them, let's say, in whatever circumstance, and you find that you're absorbing it anyway, despite the fact that you're using the appropriate self-talk and you're talking yourself through with compassion and all that stuff, like what's the energy that you can summon to not absorb all of that?
And you really do have to just recognize I am choosing to absorb it. Doesn't feel like a choice. It's a habit, of taking someone else's words as if somehow they can actually affect us. Someone can sit there and tell you you're a terrible person, terrible person, terrible person. Does that actually change us? No. Words really don't have that kind of power. We give them that power. So we have to really work on, one of the biggest tricks is to learn how to not listen. Not just listen and argue with it in your mind, but just simply, oh, there they go, blah, 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 and just not listen. It's a good time. Like if you're one of those people who has constant chatter in your mind, it's a good time to chatter about something else. I'm not kidding, folks. We have the right to protect our minds, And so if we have to be around someone, if it's a coworker or a family member, and it's, you have those appropriate conversations every now and then about how when I'm starting to feel criticized, I'm going to go for a walk or whatever. But let's face it, we can't change other people. We might be able to shift the energy over time, but it's we don't have any power that way. So it's really okay to not listen. Why do kids wear headphones all the time?
I think sometimes negativity is self-protection,
Oh, yeah.
right? And then the habit of mind, it just becomes a habit. I know, I had depression and I was in this habit of mind of negative thinking. And until I became aware of that, I couldn't change it.
Yeah. So Melissa's sharing about how this negative mind, this negative talk to others can be a form of self-protection, and it's a habit. Of course, it's a habit, and so we have to. So this is another way to remember that the person doing it is not happy. They are suffering. Now, they may think they'll be happy by having this and by fixing you, just like we think we'll be happy if we can fix them, but it's not true. It's based on inaccurate information. It's just wrong. We can't do that because happiness does not come from external thing or people. It's a habit from within. And so just like someone can have the habit of being negative all the time, we can develop a habit of being positive, or at least not focusing on the negative, not, being content with whatever's happening around us. Yes, Vanessa.
Good morning, Venerable Tendron. So what if you're in the opposite habit where it's not someone outside who's doing the verbal abuse, but you're doing that to yourself? Is it helpful? And you just have intrusive thoughts and just they keep coming up and you're trying to sit with it, which is driving you, is it helpful to say and try to generate forgiveness and say, I forgive myself? Or is that just a strategy to not sit with it and just...
Oh, I don't think you need to sit with negative self-talk.
Okay.
I think when you're under that influence of negative self-talk, it's better to not listen to you.
But okay, but I feel like that makes it come back even stronger.
Okay, so then you have to know yourself. So one thing we sometimes have to do if we're just ruminating and just we can't, is go take a walk, do something else to jar yourself out of whatever conversation you're having. Okay, so and then when it's subsided some, then you might sit with it in terms of really looking at, is this true that all this garbage I tell myself, maybe there's nothing to forgive. I think that's really important. Sometimes forgiving ourselves is like saying it's true. It's all true, and probably 98% of it's not true. We are not all one thing. you know, sure, we're selfish, not all the time. And so we need to look for those experiences where we're not being selfish, if we consider ourselves to be the most selfish person on earth, because it's a lie. And lies are distorted. And they distort what follows them. So we want to get in the habit of not lying to ourselves and lying to others. You know? And sometimes the only way to start that, I mean, I used to have to, you know, because I'd get myself all mired in guilt over this because I was a terrible spouse. I mean, I was like the world's worst spouse, you know? You know, so when I was trying to save my marriage, that thinking about what a terrible, horrible spouse I was not an effective strategy, because that just continues the same old, you know? So I had to just literally, when they would come up, I'd go, a lot of stupid stuff in my mind. I had to deal with it. You know, it's just sort of like, oh, thank you for sharing. I'm not going to listen to that right now, and just move on. I mean, it's just like, because it was destroying my life, my own self-guilt about being such a terrible person. You know, it was ridiculous. But it took that kind of work because it's a habit, you know? It's ridiculous only in the sense that it's one of those things where it's obvious to everybody else, you know, get with the program here, you know? But you know, we have habits of mind. And if we've been listening to our self-talk, listening to the criticism, it's fair. And also, I was a mean, terrible spouse, you know? It's just that I wasn't only that. But I wouldn't want to be married to me either, you know? So that's one of those things, okay? If you want to stay married, you have to change. I mean, that's what I was working on. It's like, hey, I have to change. I did not succeed. Oh, well. So, you know, but I slept better after a year of this. I'm not listening to that. Not listening to that because I made fewer mistakes. I quit externalizing my problems and blaming someone else, you know. It could quit being about, well, if he was different, then I'd be different, you know. So, you know, I had something that actually I could work with, because we can change ourselves. We can change our habits of mind, and that helps us change our habits of speech. And sometimes, you know, usually probably our behavior and our speech change first, because we just keep our mouth shut. Venerable Bina, you know, when you're around others, keep your mouth shut and keep your hands to yourself.
Watch your mind like a hawk.
Yeah. And when you're alone, watch your, you know, I mean, this is the thing. This is what we have to do. You know? The great news is it has an effect. You can try to change other people in your life till you're dead and have no effect at all. Or you can change you and everything around you changes because you've changed. Your perspective has changed. Your wisdom has changed. You know, everything is different. And that's really worth striving for, you know. Because even just, I remember when I was finally, you know, like kicked out of the house and gonna be divorced. I was living in this, it was a share house. I was in grad school, so it was a share house, and you know, and it was just like, you know, so I went from this big house with, you know, the usual accoutrements with the big house, and then I'm in a room, you know, in this house with like lots of other people, you know, and I was old, you know, I was like 40. You know, it was just, you know, it's like, but I took a walk every day because I was in that habit, you know, of walking every day. But I had done something with Thich Nhat Hanh, you know, styles. And I realized one day that I no longer ever took a walk without seeing something beautiful, you know, and that even in this midst of, you know, working 2 jobs and trying to get my master's degree and my husband having fun with someone else, you know, I was able to see something beautiful every day. And it was just such a revelation, you know, that your world can be falling apart around you. And that's not all that you are. That's not your whole life experience. It can be, and it was very hard, but it didn't have to be only that. And that was really helpful for me to just see that, that it's, that I was already capable of that. And that took practice. It took lots of walking for a long time and looking. And fortunately, I'd done that work before this event. So I had that habit to draw upon. So it's just, it's this finally directing your attention towards what you have control over. Yes, Arpita, yeah.
Yeah, I just wanted to, just a small brief point that connects with the thread of thought that's going on right now about why we constantly do negative self-talk and it's hard to get out of it. I just wanted to say I've been reading this book called The Body Keeps Score.
Yeah, that's a great book.
Yeah, and he was just yesterday, I was listening to the chapter where he says that looping thoughts, like the same thought, negative thought that comes over and over again, it absolutely cannot be cut by just telling yourself to not do it, because what's going
It's
on.
going to come up again. Yeah.
Yes, it's the chemical imbalance from a dampening of the rational mind, which is the front side of the brain, which is not working. So there's a lack of dopamine and serotonin. And to get those things up, again, like you said, Reverend, like walking is a great way to wake up the front part of the brain and get dopamine. And during our walk, if there's sunshine, that really helps with dopamine, or looking at the birds, or even doing a fun activity like cooking, singing, dancing. So these are the
Whatever
ways
you
that
find fun.
get out of that loop, instead of, self-criticizing and like sitting in frustration over
Yeah.
like
Yeah,
why.
thanks for that, Arpita. This is a key point. Buddhism doesn't see the mind and the brain as the same thing, but our mind depends on the brain. And we have this wonderful thing. So better living through chemistry is not a bad notion. And so that's why exercise works with anxiety. It changes what's going on in the body. And so what Arpita's saying is that, it's really good to do something we enjoy, because that makes, when we're stuck in this track of negative self-talk, is to do something that might increase the positive hormones in your body, like dopamine. So it's, and it kicks off your wisdom part of your brain. It helps you activate, the parts of your brain that aren't functioning at the time of that negative self-talk. So yes, it's going to arise, but it loses power over time, And I actually don't have as much of it as I used to. It just doesn't even arise as much. It still arises, but it doesn't arise as much, and it certainly doesn't have the power it wants to. I know it's lying to me. It's like, and it's coming from, of course, we hear, the voices of a parent, or voices of a grandparent, or voices of our children, or voices of our partners, that particularly hit home, or something that, those ring a bell. And of course, when we're young, our parents have total power over us. If they decided that, they don't want to feed us, we're going to die. And we intuitively know that, because we're so dependent on them for so long. But so it's not that it's an imagined threat. So when they're particularly harsh to us, we can really feel threat, even though that's not conscious, even though we're not thinking those terms, we're just, like, oh, I've failed, and we could feel really bad. But the thing of it is that it's when we're grown up now, so we have many more skills to address these kinds of habits. But just like Arpita's saying, it's not like they're just going to stop because you tell it to, Well, we don't have to listen to it. And sometimes that involves doing something else so that we can help use the body's defenses in a more useful way. Yeah. Other thoughts?
Rejection and fear of rejection,
Yeah, those are fun.
like a work friend.
Yeah. Yeah. So that's where we have to, this is where it gets really hard, doesn't it? Is that if we are trying to be someone that will not be rejected, we're trying to achieve something that's not possible. It's not possible to not be rejected by someone. We're not going to get along with everybody. We're going to, we might think that this is the person, for us, but they may not agree. And so they're not the person for us because that's not going to work too well, But if we're always trying to change so that we become that person, it's only going to be temporary and it'll never be, you're just delaying the inevitable. Even if it's on your death, you would see those couples that you think they should have never gotten married. Oh, I know because I was one of those. So, but no, I mean, it's a fear. And what we have to do is go, how can I support myself through this fear without thinking that I can solve this problem? Because being rejected is part of life. We get rejected. We get rejected from employers. We get rejected from friends. We get, we think everything's great and then somebody disappears out of our life. It's just the way it is. So having this idea that doesn't mean we don't listen to constructive criticism and go, maybe I could think about looking at that, because couples do that, but it's really understanding that trying to change the way we are in order to avoid rejection is not realistic. We can't prevent that.
I like what you said about how we have a right to protect our own mind. And since you asked what's been on our mind with the first speaker, so for me, I'm going to say anxiety and possibly hypocrisy. I have a friend that's in the other branch of Buddhism, and he mentioned that in the branch of Buddhism led by the Dalai Lama disapproves of sex outside of marriage.
That's not even that's not true.
Okay, then we can stop there.
It's not.
I did do some research and I did find where the Dalai Lama did say that, well, he focused on homosexuality and he said that was inappropriate. And I dug further and I did see where he was quoted as saying all sex outside of marriage is
Well, I'd have to know the context because it's not true. Tibetans didn't marry. And they said, in our text, the Lamrim Chenmo, the great treatise on the stages of the path to enlightenment, it says in there, sex like 5 times a night's okay. More than that's too much.
regardless.
We are all underperforming, don't worry.
Regardless of whether you're doing it with
They-
married partner.
No, you don't have to be married, but if you have a relationship, the tradition supports monogamy because adultery, whether it's in marriage or not, is harmful to the other person. So it's under the vows of sexual misconduct. No. So if you're in a relationship, a committed relationship, then having sex with someone else is considered negative. And that's why, because of the harm it causes to the other. Also because sex is not what would you call it? An action that has no consequences. So, it's always, you have sex with someone else and they get pregnant that first time. Well, that sucks, but it's still reality. There are consequences to to sex. I mean, so it's not, you can get STDs, there are all sorts of things. It's not an act that, like eating, it's more like eating chocolate if you're diabetic, caution, caution, so there are a lot of things about sexual misconduct that, and, basically in Buddhism, just like in every other religious tradition, just anything, that's just designed for pleasure is considered a negativity. Why would that be?
When you say just designed for pleasure, the pleasure destructive
No,
consequences,
pleasure,
or
just pleasure. Yeah, now, granted, they also say, more than 5 times a night is probably too much, but, so, I guess it depends on your definition. So, try to figure that one out, don't, But so why would that be? If try to put your Buddhist, logic going.
Separate yourself from the attachment.
Yeah, to this craving. Well, and that pleasure, external pleasure, sensory pleasure is the answer. Sex has a purpose. That's how we get babies. Monks and nuns don't have sex. Maybe we're just jealous. so you can't have any either. Oh, we don't. So. But I mean, that's the thing. I mean, so it's just, everything in Buddhism is about understanding that our addiction to sensory pleasures is hiding where true satisfaction is. That all of our reliance on having just the right temperature, just the right food, just the right car, just the right phone, whatever it is never going to be fulfilling. Even relying on our body is going to ultimately fail us. My brother had a stroke on Friday, and he's fine now. He's home now, whatever that means. So they don't know why, he had a stroke.
Oh.
He's fine now. He's home. I mean, they can't figure out what caused it. But anyway, so you're cruising along, and it's just like, then you're not. It's like we have to remember that, relying on external things for the sense of meaningful life, or holding the idea, grasping after a long life, can ruin your day. So it's like, we just need to recognize that all the things that we enjoy or don't enjoy through the senses are temporary. And most of what we experience lasts seconds. So that's not where we're going to find satisfaction. Satisfaction is a mental state. So we have to work with our minds to be able to be okay, no matter what's happening externally to us.
Just on that, first of all, I don't think Buddhism is judgmental,
Right.
although I've been involved in groups where there seems to be some.
Because people were in it, I
Right.
bet.
It's like a checkoff list. But if you go to the core of it, for me anyway, it's more about like the middle way, right?
Right.
And so you try not to get caught up in different groups where there's sort of checkoff list for acceptance, which happens in different lineages and even within lineages.
Yeah.
And people fall off the wagon, so to speak, or whatever you want to call it. So I just try to stay away from those communities sometimes, or even literature that seem to suggest that.
And you have to consider the context. Like the Lam Rim Chinmo, which is the main text we study in this tradition, is a course for monastics. It's amazing they bring up sex at all. But it's taught to a bunch of monks. That doesn't even include women, you know? So, I mean, it's just, you know, so that is a context that we have to keep in mind. Also, the Buddha said, don't take my word for it. You know, investigate it all. Yeah, so we, you know, and it's true. We, you know, so even with our sexual relationships, we need to check up and say, am I doing harm? You know. You know, that probably doesn't apply to most of us. So it's just, it's, you know, it's just really of always checking up. Is this harming someone? And sometimes that person can be me, you know, and that counts. So it's just, it's, yeah, I don't get caught up in the, I mean, I have 364 vows. So I have a lot of vows to keep, but it's not, you know, but that's, you know, my way of reminding myself all the time that I'm on a particular path and there's a reason for that, you know. So it's a protection, not a constraint. No. So, but it's not, you know, really just, you get to choose. Because actually, you're the only one who can choose. So I can walk away from this as well. Yeah.
I don't know if I'll phrase this right, but how do you balance, you know, talking about external wants and needs and money, whatever, how do you use Buddhism like mainstream with balancing your desire to provide,
Right.
and make things better? So, you know, it's reality that you.
Well, yeah, I think that's a key of where the balance comes in. Of course, we need things. We need jobs, we need money, we need clothes, we need all sorts of things. But this idea to make things better, we have to look more carefully, start to think that way, because that usually implies, not always, but implies that there's some happiness out there by, you know, like, you know, never spending any time with your family because you're working to make sure that they have the best of everything. You've got to really look at that and say, is that really going to help them through life? Is having no relationship with their parents, you know, it's, you know, these are the kind, you know, you really want to look at, if I'm going to have to really give up something that I need to function well, so that my kids have, you know, the latest, greatest technology. Am I selling myself short with my relationship with my kids? Because, you know, I'm probably important to my kids. I don't have kids, so this is totally metaphorical. So, but you know what I mean? So you really want to start looking at, what am I defining as make things better than I had? My father was really big on that. He grew up very poor. Both my parents came from the slums of Memphis, and he was determined not to have that kind of life as an adult. I never saw my father when I was a kid. He came in, I mean, he was never in town for more than 48 hours or 24 for a long time. He traveled constantly, you know, so he'd come and yell at us and leave, because, you know, he had to be the parent when he came. I couldn't just say, oh, let your mom take care of it. So he was never there. I hate people who work so hard. That's how I grew up. I mean, I was just like, if I didn't want to marry an ambitious man, I'm not ambitious. You know, it was just sort of like, it was like the deafness, you know, because it took my father away from me. And I think, you know, some of that is ridiculous. You know, I'm a grown person. I don't think this anymore, but it really is true. If you want balance, you really have to put all the pieces together and say, what do I think I'm going to be able to provide? I think it gave him exactly what he was looking for. I don't think he really wanted to spend more time with us.
How does he talk about the middle path, middle road?
Well, no, I wouldn't, you know, it doesn't get down to the nitty gritty level. but it really is about knowing what's, all right, like I have this description. Sorry. Where do I have this description? Is that it? Close. That we are trying to develop our habits so that we can figure out what is adequate. So our needs, how to meet our needs in an adequate way. You know, and you know, our culture kind of goes adequate. We don't want adequate. Yeah.
Yeah, because when you do something too much, you could be avoiding something else or numbing.
Which is what we do most of the time. We're constantly just distracting ourselves from the discomfort of this moment. That's what we do in our heads. We just travel off in some other place. And that will always be dissatisfying because it's by nature saying, I'm not happy, so I need to be somewhere else. Whereas opposed to, you know, remember that happiness study where they just, you know, they got 40,000 people or something to agree that they could be texted just, you know, at random times through the day and just ask them like 4 simple questions about, you know, how do you feel right now? You know, whether you're happy or not, you know, what are you doing? Are you focused on it or whatever? And they found that the biggest factor in being happiness was being focused on what they were doing, even if they did not like what they were doing. That being distracted is suffering. We're much more content if we just stay focused. We finish things faster, you know, so chores go by faster. But we are in the habit of always trying to take ourselves away from things we don't like. You know, so we want to, so when we have to do something, you know, we work very hard to try to figure out how to like it. You know, or we can learn to tolerate it as something that just we need to do, which of course, as adults, we do all the time. But we want to look for those places where we have resistance to just, you know, doing it, or maybe consider changing it if it's something that you can't seem to find your peace with. But so this idea of adequate. So we need, but of course, this requires what? We have to notice what we're doing, and we have to bring our wisdom to it. We have to evaluate. And we have to evaluate as honestly as we can, which is why we want to recognize when we're lying to ourselves. When we're thinking, oh, but it's really necessary for me to be able to provide this for my kids. You know, and of course, there's a lot. You know, when we have relationships, we have responsibilities. When you have kids, you have lots of responsibilities. So it's just, so it's not easy to figure this out. And, you know, but it is, we want to weigh everything and see, okay, put it in balance, just like you said, you know, like, am I giving up too much here in order to do, you know, more than enough here? So figuring out enoughness is, so this is why I've tried to practice, you know, being good enough, you know, so I'm good enough. I'm trying hard enough, you know, the day is good enough. You know. So okay. So how do we meditate on this? What does that mean anyway?
Not being perfectionist and too ambitious.
That's sort of like hopefully a result, you know, is recognizing that ambition won't necessarily be fulfilling. getting what we think we want. So we're going to do a meditation on that. So, all right. So try to get as comfortable as you can in these uncomfortable chairs. Or try to not worry about how comfortable the chair is. So use a cushion under your feet if your feet don't touch the ground. To avoid that dangling leg problem. So try to sit up straight for a moment, take a couple of deep breaths and exhale for a longer time. And you inhale to help activate some of those body's responses. Now notice if the muscles in your face are tense and try to let them relax. Sometimes just bringing your attention to that part of the body will allow it to relax. So the area around your eyes, let that soften. Around the mouth, the jaw. And just notice what's happening at this moment. How the temperature of the room feels on your skin. The feeling of sitting in the chair. The sounds of the people around you. And the physical sensation of the breath entering and leaving the nose. And let your out breath carry off your worries. Just enjoy the peaceful rhythm of your breath. So now I want you to ask yourself if you're yearning for anything, for contentment, for peace of mind, if you're yearning for happiness, are you seeking something? Now try to think of experiences that you have had when you thought that something would bring a sense of fulfillment, but it did not. And look at these experiences. Were they directed outward? What did they depend upon? Was it going to rely on the feeling of success in the eyes of others? Or on praise, admiration from others? Did it rely on having material things? Are there similar experiences? You recognize any patterns in your seeking? Did it involve relationships with others? Now look at experiences that you found satisfying. And see if you can identify the sources of the fulfillment. Did it involve others? Did it involve your goals or someone else's goals? Was the source really outside of you? Or about some way of thinking about yourself? And again, just bring your mind to noticing what's happening right now. The feeling of your body sitting in the chair. The sounds around you. The sensation of the breath going in and out of the body. And then just bring your attention back to the group. So analytical meditations are just a conversation we have with ourselves. But if we do it in a quiet moment and with, meaningful questions that we ask ourselves, so that we're not just either rehearsing some anger or rehearsing some fantasy or whatever, that we're really trying to look at the experiences we've actually had and looking to see if there are any patterns in the way we're thinking about them. And then, the next step is kind of looking at, well, is it true? Like asking yourself, does fulfillment come from other people? Or most of our experiences where we feel good at the end of the day. We go, oh, this was a good day. Are they about getting what you want? Or are they about helping someone else? So that we really get familiar with what we actually find satisfying. And it can be as simple as, oh, I got my stuff done that I needed to do. I fulfilled my commitments today. And so so thoughts like that are saying something about us, aren't they? It's not, it's not about whether someone else recognizes that we fulfilled those goals, or whether it's about we feel good about having fulfilled our commitments. The difference. And then sometimes you have to look at, okay, am I filling my day up with too much stuff that doesn't need to happen? Because sometimes we have a list of things we'd like in our head of things that we'd like to do, and a lot of it comes from conversations with our friends about, reading this book or seeing this movie or trying this restaurant, or I don't know what you guys do, so, but we want to look at if we're filling our, our time, which is limited, with too much stuff that isn't really satisfying. Because it's it's like at the end of the year when you kind of go, what did I do this year? And you just can't think of anything really that you want to hold on to. It may mean that you're filling your life with too much just stuff and not enough meaning. and you don't have time to do things of meaning because you're filling your time with too much stuff. Because there's a lot of stuff in there. We can, we can literally never run out of stuff to do. And so we have to make sure the stuff we do, is somehow meaningful. And then meaning can just be, that it's providing me a way to live. It's my income. It can be that I have clean clothes. I mean, those things matter too. It's not, but it's just really, it's like, how many movies in your lifetime do you need to watch? For me, it's how many murder mysteries do you really need to read? So far, I haven't run out with that. So, but we need to, really look. If we feel like, gee, I didn't get anything, I want it done this week. You want to look at, well, then what did I do? Because I certainly didn't have a lot of free time and I was just, sitting on the couch. So, this is how we can find balance, is we kind of notice, this was not a satisfying week. Why? If you have spent no time on say, your mind, you can get lost in the shuffle of stuff. But if you can, really apply your mind to things that are meaningful to you, even if it just means learning about something that's meaningful. Reading like my case, reading the Dharma instead of murder mystery is really helpful. I can attest to that. One of the things I always advise is people to, if you're reading the Dharma, always read, you have two types of Dharma books to read. One that's helping you with some of these processes, like what kind of questions to ask yourself when you're trying to meditate or investigate attachment or investigate aversion or investigate judging people, and and another kind is that inspiring stuff. Like, yes, it would be so nice if people, like myself, treated other people kindly. How nice it, that inspire us to value the small things that we do that are just kind. It's nice to be in the presence of someone who's smiling or has something pleasant to say, or it all seems so trivial. And one of my favorite examples that no one agrees with, just so you know, so I'm not going to be upset when you don't agree with me, is there's an English version of the movie Pollyanna. When I saw it again, I realized, oh, I clearly missed the boat on what it means to be like a Pollyanna. Because Pollyanna was not just this, cheerful person. Pollyanna just was good at finding something positive to look at. And so one of her things in the story is that she kept visiting a woman who was ill, an elderly woman who was ill. She was like I don't know, this size girl, so good with ages. And so the woman was sick and in bed. She hadn't gone outside and she hadn't opened her curtains in years, blah, blah, blah. And so, Pollyanna would drop in to say, oh, well, are you thinking about going to the festival, blah, 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 blah. And the woman would just complaining. She goes, oh, and just, have you thought? And so she played the glad game. What can make you glad? Well, there's nothing to make me glad because I can't go and da, da, da. She goes, I've got it. You can be glad for the people not having to see you at the festival. Isn't that interesting? And that's become this idea of toxic positivity. Oh, you're just being a Pollyanna. I bet nobody thinks that that's what Pollyanna said. Because sometimes compassion, is just being truthful. It's like, it's not about just lying to ourselves about, you know, what's positive. You know, it's about finding something that genuinely will be nice for someone or for ourselves. You know, and if you don't want to be the person that everybody's be so glad that you didn't show up, then you want to look at, you know, what are your habits? So, but it's just interesting, isn't it? We distort things. You know, I think it's such an interesting thing about our society that we would distort a story like that into being too Pollyanna. That says something about our habits. It's very important to us not to look sentimental. I love Buddhism because it allows you to be sappy. Wouldn't it be wonderful if everyone was happy? You know, why not think that? So, but you know, and we're one of those people. So we really want to look at what does that mean? You know, does it mean getting what you want, or does it mean having that sense of fulfillment, or that you're, you know, you had some meaning to your day? Yeah. Hi, Sherry.
Hi there. Yeah, I wanted to mention that I had the chance to watch the new Netflix special. I don't know if it's new, but the one with Dalai Lama and Desmond Tutu. And I really highly recommend it if anybody hasn't seen it. But one thing that they both said is that they both admitted they're just not naturally happy, and that they have to work on it. They've had to work on it. They've both been through their really hard times.
Yeah.
And what they said was, I think it was the Dalai Lama that said that serenity isn't ready-made, that you have to work on it and exercise it and tone it like it's a muscle.
Yeah, so Sherry's bringing up the movie that's being shown on Netflix, which with His Holiness and Desmond Tutu, which I don't have Netflix, so I haven't seen it. But we read the book of Joy, which is a conversation between the two of them. And Sherry's bringing up that His Holiness said, you know, and both of them have said that, you know, they have to work at being joyful, that it just didn't come naturally to them. And that serenity doesn't just come to us, because in fact, what Buddhism teaches is that we have this habit of dissatisfaction. You know, we are naturally dissatisfied. And part of that is because we think we should be able to get it out there, you know, and we also think that we are the center of the universe. And so the world should cater to us. And so when it's not catering to us, we're kind of like miffed. Is that a word? So anyway, but yeah, it's something, you know, so if you haven't read the Book of Joy, I highly recommend it. It's a good read. So it's just, and it's, you know, it's this idea that, and we're not talking about the kind of happiness of sense pleasures, the delights of having things feel good, taste good, sound, you know, like we like it, whatever, you know, it's about that bigger sense of like, my life's good. And that's one of the reasons why it's stressed so often to understand that if you have the freedom to be here, to like take a class like this, you have good conditions in your life. And you want to rejoice about that, because most of the world doesn't have, you know, freedom of free time. I mean, and it's kind of hard for us to recognize that, because we see an awful lot of people with good conditions, you know, but there are billions of people who literally just work to get a little food every day, or food for their kids. There's no such thing as free time. There's no such thing as exploring their habits of mind. There's no such thing of, trying to choose between this thing that they like or that thing they like. This is none of that in their lives. And it doesn't mean their lives are just totally just despairing misery, because they're too busy for that. We have one of the things that good conditions bring us is a lot of time to think about that dissatisfaction. So we want to, instead of wasting all this good conditions that we have, we want to use them to help us not be so dissatisfied. And that's all mental work, not external to us. I never asked if there were any questions. I never asked if there were any questions today. Sorry. See, sometimes you have to shout them out because I forget to ask. Any questions? No, we're down at the last minute. Oh, have you? Good. I don't know. I'm used to this but all of a sudden I thought, I haven't said any questions.
We've asked.
Okay, good. Thanks. That's helpful. So, all right. All right. So, any announcements?
Well, yeah, our outdoor gathering is
It's not
canceled,
happening.
but I don't know if anybody brought food. If you did, we might have some food here, or maybe we can all go out to lunch together. If you want to stay, just join us in the library afterwards.
Okay.
Yeah, what else? I don't know. How to meditate starts in a few weeks on Discovering Buddhism on Monday nights. Yeah, Meditation 101 was canceled. We're doing an animal liberation on the 25th, which just means it's going to be here, and we're getting a bunch of worms. Gonna do lots
Okay,
of
so
energy.
animal liberation, what's the point of that? Anybody know? No. It's
Letting them be free.
from what?
Exploitation.
Exploitation. Yes, that's a good word.
Killed.
From being killed. We buy them from the bait shop. Are you having a conversation back there? Would you like to share it?
I asked her if she read Animal Farm by George Orwell.
They all, yes, yeah. So, yeah, be careful. We don't liberate them, they'll take over. So, but, okay, so animal liberation. So this is a big practice of Lama Zopa Rinpoche, the founder of these centers. And it's about, taking animals that are in the very near future are going to be killed for exploitative purposes, so that somebody can catch fish or something. So the idea is that you rescue them from that. Like Lama Zopa Rinpoche often in India or Nepal, he'll buy like a goat from a butcher, a live goat and put it on a farm, and stuff like that. And the reasoning behind this is, first of all, of course, it reduces that animal suffering. It's going to have the joy of old age. So, but according to the Buddha, all our illnesses or untimely deaths or all that kind of stuff, physical difficulties, have to do with the ripening of karma where we've hurt someone in the past, physically. So all our sicknesses are not taking care of we're not protecting life, So it ripens as our own physical illnesses, and untimely death, So it's this really very, for the short answer, it's like, so you kill someone in a past life, someone's going to kill you in this one or the next one or the next one, so it's kind of like that. So if we want to cut these cycles of things circling back, we want to respect life, and liberating animals is considered a good way to purify our negative karma that has to do with harming life. So, most of us are meat eaters or have been in this, at some point in this life, we cannot survive in this form without killing. We take showers, we kill all sorts of things. I mean, our body is something like 1/3 human and 2/3 microorganisms that are not human, so we have this very interdependent existence. And so doing something like rescuing an animal that's going to be killed is supposed to help us, mitigate the harm, the habit of harming, the habit of thinking that it's okay for me to kill for my own benefit, for my own pleasure, So, just to help distance ourselves from the idea that killing for ourselves is a good plan, So, yes.
When I did the animal liberations before, it's funny, you go into the pet shops and they would wonder what you need the crickets or whatever for, And I tell them and they'd say, here, we're gonna donate some. So, it was funny how that trickled down.
Yeah, of course, most of that's so that they can catch them again, but I'm kidding. I can be very cynical. So, but this, and one of the things you want to do, people have learned from this practice, is you want to make sure you don't release them somewhere where they're just going to get killed immediately. So like you don't release fish right back into the fisherman's waters, so we would always have to ask. In Australia, we did this a lot in Australia. And so we don't have to ask, okay, where do you get your worms? Where do you get so we would not release them in those areas. So one of the things with worms or crickets or whatever is, you kind of find dirt in a park or somewhere, but you make sure you cover it with leaves so the birds don't immediately go, oh, there's one. So, anyway, but you want to be thoughtful about it. Now, can we really protect the worms from harm? No.
The worms actually crawl out onto the sidewalk and then die from the heat.
Yeah, well,
And I think they're blind, so I don't. So if you were to put them somewhere cooler, I guess.
yeah, the deep earth around a tree is good, but it's, but the point is that this is to train our minds.
Or rescue a lizard and the next day it goes down in temperature.
Oh, right.
But that doesn't kill them, so that's good, But the point is that no, we don't have the power to prevent karma from ripening for someone else. We can't do that. If we could, the Buddhists would have already taken all our negativities away and we'd just be living in bliss. But we can only take care of our own mind. So this kind of practice is really about developing the mind that wants to protect life, that values life, no matter whether it's an ugly little squirmy little worm, or whether it's a child. That we want to really just have such a strong habit that just never wants to harm something just because you can, because you're bigger than, because they're annoying. So my example was always in where I was in Chenrezig, the sidewalk that went from the meditation hall to our residences, it often had lots of ants on it. And literally it was felt like, I'm not, you have to be extremely patient to not step on the ants. And then I found that annoying because I'm an impatient person, right? And so I just had to start thinking of them as little babies in baskets. And that if I was in a river and there were all these little babies in baskets, I would not hesitate to go carefully and make sure I didn't drown any of those babies. So why am I so uncaring about the ants? They don't want to die. It's just me, I can't be bothered. Well, that's not very nice. So it's about developing habits where we care no matter, this helps us with equanimity, where we just, and this is kind of a mind that I want, that is concerned about everybody. They don't have to look like me. They don't have to be baby me's. They can be little tiny ants. They can even be little things that I don't like at all, like scary things, I don't know, snakes, things like that, which they also had in Australia. but so I just did my best to, run from building to building, so I didn't have to worry about the snakes. So, but I had to worry about the ants. Anyway, so that's the idea behind animal liberation. So if there's somebody that's sick in your life, that's struggling with a health issue, you can liberate animals for them. We have a lot of sickness going on in members of our community. So it's a great practice to do, so if you're worried about someone, this is a practice you can do. So, because they may not be well enough to do it. So, all right. Did I manage to go over time? Yes. Okay.
With the 2 more announcements, the Buddhist Mind Series is also starting on March 4th on Zoom, Saturday mornings at 10 a.m. and that's on mental balance. So that's a great course. It's a new course too. And also, if anyone mistakenly grabbed the bathroom key, it is missing the silver one. So please just leave it on the desk. We are running out of bathroom keys.
And
Thank you.
Singing Bowls is on hiatus.
Oh, 24th, February 24th. Yes, Gladys will be back for that one on February 24th, Friday, February 24th. Thank you.
Okay. So now let's dedicate all the wonderful things we've done with our minds this morning, that it benefits others. May all beings everywhere plagued by sufferings of body and mind obtain an ocean of happiness and joy by virtue of our merits. May no living creature suffer, commit evil, or ever fall ill. May no one be afraid or belittled with a mind weighed down by depression. May the blind see forms and the deaf hear sounds. May those whose bodies are worn with toil be restored on finding repose. May the naked find clothing, the hungry find food. May the thirsty find water and delicious drinks. May the poor find wealth, those weak with sorrow find joy. May the forlorn find hope, constant happiness, and prosperity. May there be timely rains and bountiful harvests. May all medicines be effective and wholesome prayers bear fruit. May all who are sick and ill quickly be freed from their ailments. Whatever diseases there are in the world, may they never occur again. May the frightened cease to be afraid and those bound be free. May the powerless find power and may people think of benefiting each other. For as long as space remains, for as long as sentient beings remain, until then, may I too remain to dispel the miseries of the world. And then for the long, healthy, happy lives of our teachers, for His Holiness, in the land encircled by snow mountains, you are the source of all happiness and good. All powerful Chinrezi, Tenzin Gyatso, please remain until samsara ends. Lama Zopa Rinpoche, you who uphold the subduer's moral way, who serve as the bountiful bearer of all, sustaining, preserving, and spreading Manchana's victorious doctrine, who masterfully accomplished magnificent prayers honoring the 3 jewels, Savior of myself and others, your disciples, please, please live long. So thank you all. Thank you all at home. Good to see you, or so see you.
Thank you.
All right, y'all take care. I will see you soon.
Thank you.
Thank you, Veneral Tendron.
Good to see you, Sherry.
Good to see you, Peggy.
And now they're saying good night to John Boy.
And everyone else too. Bye-bye.